The question is, which one is it? Is it rigid individualism where we get it out of the mud on our own? Or is it about creating communities where we work together to build our collective resources? What's also interesting is that somehow for him, these communities no longer exist because of liberal or progressive policy decisions.
But when the policies came in and started destroying the Black community slowly and slowly, matter of fact, it was supposed to get rid of poverty or at least lessen it, but we have more poverty now than we had back then.
I think.
So I want to share a little bit about I took a course. It was called it was a theology course I had to take in undergrad. Okay. It was a theology course, and it was taught by a Black professor. And for some reason, it wasn't even that much about theology. It was more about kind of like Black history almost a little bit.
Okay.
And he had a similar perspective as the one that the people he's interviewing has, where he's basically saying, okay, and the perspective is basically anti civil rights, which is odd for a Black person, right? It's a Black professor, right? It's a Black professor, anti-civil rights, pro-segregation, okay?
Pro-segregation,
yes.
Segregation.
Yes.
That's extreme.
Yeah, and so I had this is a class, so I got to take tests about this stuff, right? So I'm like, all right, let me make sure I understand what is being said, because basically, we had trouble because he thought I was a heckler, because I'm like, what do you mean, civil rights is bad? What do you mean segregate? So I'm challenging him. He think I'm just trying to be a pain. I'm not trying to be a pain, but I'm gonna have to take tests. I'm gonna have to write papers for you. I need to understand what I'm talking about. If this is what you're saying, it don't make sense to me. So I gotta get to it. So we had some problems early on, because I think he thought I was bad faith, but I'm not bad faith. I just this is not easy to swallow. A lot of other kids, like, they don't, a lot of people, they don't really interact. It's kind of, I'm at class, I'm gonna sit here, I'm gonna go home. Or I'm like, hold on, what'd you just say? What?
Right. Like, they're just there, but they're not really taking in that information.
Right. But anyway, let me get to, sorry to cut you off. But back to what he was, the reason I brought him up is his argument was basically that before civil rights, back, and when we had segregation, Black folks couldn't go anywhere, basically, right? Like, we had to stick together. It wasn't a choice but to stick together in our own communities. He said, and when we had to stick together in our own communities, what happened was you had the educated Black folks would become the leaders of that community. They would, they would learn things, and then they would, start schools, and you would have a fully Black area that had high quality Black leaders in it that kind of led the area and brought everybody up. They would do business, with each other and all of that. And you had a thriving Black community. And he said, what happens after civil rights and you end segregation is now those Black successful leaders, they can leave, right? And they leave and they go to white areas. I went to white area, right? So they leave and they go to white areas. And what you have is basically only the poor Blacks left over that didn't have the education or the skills. And the Black people that do have the skills and education just go to white areas, and you end up with a lack of leadership and community. And you just end up with just the worst left over and high crime rates and stuff. And that's why he personally, even though he's a college professor, he said, I still live in the hood. He said, and I choose to do so because I want to be that resource in the community. I don't want to be just another person that, made it and then leaves, and then, good luck to everybody else. So that's why he was pro segregation. He said, because it was better for us during that time period. I'm like, I can understand it being better for the Black community, but I don't want it to be better because I can't go nowhere else.
I understand that perspective, but no, segregation isn't the way to go, especially in a society where you have to exist reasonably with other races. It's just like, and why would you even want to separate yourself based on races? It's like, that's just that's something that you can't choose.
It's not good principally, but he was just saying effectively we had talent and leadership before and guidance, and we lost that as soon as we, those people were able to leave.
Yeah, it's and that's where, to me, if he was a Black conservative, I think that's where where in this example you have contradicting opinions, where it's just like, is it if you're talking about an individualist perspective, are you Republican for individual perspectives?
Well, no,
or
he
are
wasn't
you
an
gonna,
individual. He was community. He was all about community.
all right, it's just like, or are you going to bring up community perspectives and Black Wall Street and all of that? Because like, if just like in this example with that dude, he was bringing up both.
He was in both.
like,
Yeah, my professor wasn't contradicting himself. He was all about the community, and he was saying that lack of segregation kept the community together. But I can't argue. I mean, we forced to be together.
Right. Yeah, it's just like that's by force. That's no choice. I think I would prefer us to come together by choice, and I would even imagine that it would be a better society, or we would have better application from us coming together by choice than that being something that the government requires. That's just bad.
Yeah, it's bad policy, and I disagreed with him. But like, imagine you did have folks like me and you, my dad, and like like people in it. Like that would help if if all the Black kids had people like us to talk to. Like
For
that
sure.
would be great. Like we would be better. I still disagree with segregation, but he's not. I don't think he's wrong that there is value in having strong leaders that ain't drug dealers.
Absolutely, he's absolutely right about that. And it's just like, if I think that you still have those ideas and concepts, but you hold it just like your professor, like you do it in application like your professor does. Instead of, he's a man with means, he's a professor. Sure, he's probably been there a few years, might be tenured, has a decent salary, so he could afford to live in the suburbs of New Orleans, wherever he's at. He could afford to live in the suburbs, have a decent life. He's choosing not to, and I think that choice that's where it's honorable, and that's where that community can be built and not forcible, not forced. Like, and if more people made that choice and were conscious, then I think that's how you build a community. But forcing it, I think that's not the way you build a fair society.